Hello and TGRIF. Thank Green and Red. It's Friday. We're here for another week in review, which we started doing about a month and a half ago. And we're having a lot of fun doing that. You know, GNR usually stands for Green and Red, but on Fridays it stands for griping and ranting, because we pick a couple things that have been going on in the particular week that we're talking about, and we share our thoughts about them. So we have a couple big issues to talk about today. I'm here with my co-host and dear comrade, Scott Parkin, and he's going to actually talk for most of the show. But before we get to Scott, we want to start by just mentioning that right now we are in Striketober, one of the biggest strike waves we've seen in a long time. And I think it gives a lot of us a lot of hope. We're currently seeing about 5 or 6 fairly major strikes. The biggest, which is scheduled to start, I think, on Monday. There was recently a strike vote, comes from the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees Union. These are film and TV crews who work in horrific conditions. They have like 18-hour work days, and they can't sleep and get in car accidents because they're tired. And, you know, women were returning to the set to work, you know, immediately after miscarriages. So it's a bad situation. So that's 60,000 workers there scheduled to go out on Monday. On Thursday, yesterday, as we record this, 10,000 John Deere workers went out, including in Ottumwa, Iowa, which is where Radar O'Reilly's from. So I think Radar is probably walking the picket line with them. 24,000 Kaiser Permanente workers are about to go out. 1,400 Kellogg workers, and we're not sure if Tony the Tiger is going to scab or not. They're working on him. I think they might have to send like one of the lions from Lion King after to kind of, you know, beat him up a little bit to, you know, set him straight. And then we just saw about a week ago, about 2 weeks ago, the conclusion of a successful strike by Nabisco, where over 1,000 workers went out for better wages and working conditions. We'll probably talk about this in some depth next weekend. Mike Elk, Payday Reporter, who has been with us on the show many times, is going to LA. And so we're going to talk to him about the IATSE strike while he's there. Okay. So before we get going, also, I forgot to mention, we have postcards too. So if any of you are interested, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this now, that means you're watching on YouTube, which means all you have to do is look down into the show notes. And that has every bit of information you would ever need on how to support us and get postcards and send money and love and all that kind of stuff. So without further ado, Scott just spent a few days in our nation's capital, and probably did a little sightseeing, a little touring, maybe went to museums, but I don't think that was the major reason you were there, was it?
No, I went for the people versus fossil fuels. As folks who are regular listeners know, we've actually done a number of shows on some of these pipeline fights. We've talked about the Keystone XL pipeline. We've talked about Line 3 a couple of times. We've talked about the state crackdown on people fighting the Dakota Access Pipeline and the Line 3 pipeline. And so this week in Washington, D.C. was a fairly big event targeting the Biden administration, who, you know, came in on these false promises of being like a climate champion and wanting to move things forward on the climate front very much, and then also on the fossil fuel front. He also has made a number of gestures towards the original owners of this land, indigenous leadership, and that's everything to, you know, Deb Haaland being the head of the Department of Interior, to the head of the Bureau of Indian Affairs being a Native American as well. And so, clearly for the moment that we're in, this is not enough. We're seeing fires, we're seeing floods, we're seeing droughts, we're seeing fossil fuels still running rampant. They still have captured our federal government, and they still have captured just about all the state governments. And so this week was an event called the People versus Fossil Fuels, which actually started off with a little bit of creative messaging on the statue of Andrew Jackson in Lafayette Square in front of the White House. Andrew Jackson is a known genocidal maniac, slave owner, hunter of fugitive slaves. And so, someone tagged up his statue in Lafayette Park with the message "Expect Us," which is a part of a resistance line that we see in movements common these days, which says "Respect us" or "Expect us." And then that day we saw a mass civil disobedience at the White House with about 150 people. We actually pretty much saw a repeat of that every day this week through Thursday. And then today, instead of going to the White House, they went up to Capitol Hill. There was action at the Department of Interior yesterday, which is also where the Bureau of Indian Affairs is, with over 50 Indigenous leaders actually sitting in and risking arrest. There was action at the Chamber of Commerce, where members of Extinction Rebellion hung a banner off of the building, basically calling it the Chamber of Climate Chaos. And then I just want to say that the sort of like important thing here is that there was a lot of tension with police. Like we know, the DC police are on edge after the Capitol riot, but they definitely were targeting and taking unnecessary steps to put make things worse, particularly with Indigenous protesters. On Monday, there was an incident where one of the Indigenous protesters actually had thrown an orange, and they tackled her. They gang tackled her, a small Indigenous woman, which led to a lot of like kind of confrontation and a series of scuffles between protesters and the police and the Secret Service, and that there was different episodes like that through the course of the week, and it's just really a shame that we see this sort of behavior by the police who want to have this like sort of happier, friendly sort of image, but I don't really actually think they do. And
they responded kind of more vigorously than they did on January 6th.
They definitely responded more vigorously than they did on January 6th, and they were targeting like non-white protesters. What a shock, right? And so I haven't actually heard too much about what happened today, but I do know that there were big protests at the Capitol, and the Capitol Police are the ones who've definitely been in the spotlight since January 6th. I do know that there was Indigenous youth and allies did sit-ins around the Capitol in the streets, blocking traffic, et cetera. But I want to just kind of put this in context, and for Week in Review and Griping and Ranting, is that we haven't really, the Biden-Harris administration has not stepped up the way in which they promised to when they were on the election trail. They haven't stepped up the way they promised to in the first 100 days. And it's very much this sort of like liberal thing is like, things will get better when we pass the infrastructure bill. Things will get better when we get a reconciliation bill, all of that sort of like kind of bullshit. And the important thing is that people are dying and people are suffering. They actually started letting oil run through Line 3 a couple of weeks ago, which is part of the reason that, people were so fired up for this week with the People versus Fossil Fuels. People are, and when I say fired up, I'm talking about people are angry. They're frustrated. They're shell-shocked. It's terrible. And so we're going to be seeing a whole lot more direct action. And like they wrote on Jackson's statue, they need to expect us.
Well, two of our favorite people, Manchin and Sinema, are insisting that something like $100 billion that was supposed to be dedicated for climate change in the new budget be taken out. So, and the Democrats are bending over backwards to appease them. So obviously, I think, it's not going to get better anytime soon.
And just a note there, like Manchin, I really have no expectation we'll be doing the right thing on.
It's funny, just kind of, the media always says he comes from a coal state. It never points out that he actually owns significant shares in coal operations. So this is Black Lung Joe Manchin we're talking about here, whose suits cost more than the average West Virginian probably takes home in a month. So, but anyway,
also of that pair of Sinema, as they I heard
Sinchin,
and I heard Man Sinema when I was in DC this week. She actually campaigned as a climate champion too, which is like hugely huge. And she was, formerly a Green Party politician.
Nader and Green Party, yeah. So she's also probably almost certainly going to be a one-term senator too. Although, the Koch brothers have probably already set her up with a nice sinecure. She's currently teaching a class at Arizona State on how to raise money for a campaign. But the best part of all this is, where it is? It's in the School of Social Work. So you can go there, you can learn how to, help people who are in distress, who are in crisis, and how to raise money and shake down corporate donors and, abandon the people who voted for you and screw over everybody who had some faith in you. So,
and as our audience knows, we never miss an opportunity to Manchin and Sinema the last couple of weeks. The other thing we should note about Sinema is that she's missing certain important negotiations so she can go on a fundraising junket in Europe, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it says a lot. Democrats and liberals are apoplectic, especially on social media, talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene and Boebert and Gates, and they should be. Those people are utterly fetid and reprehensible. But, when a group of people verbally, I don't even want to say the word harass, they just verbally confront, which I have no problem with, Sinema in an airplane or in a public place, her colleagues in the Senate come to her rescue as if she's been traumatized and triggered, and Cory Booker proposes an amendment to condemn people who gave her a hard time. And it's really utterly reprehensible. And liberals need to realize, like, Marjorie Taylor Greene is a disgusting, horrible human, but she's utterly powerless. She's not even on committees, right? But she says ignorant things. I mean, Sinema right now is basically, Sinema and Manchin are essentially ensuring, I think, another Trump administration. And the thing about it is, we keep talking about these new voter laws in all these states. We're at the point now, it may not matter because Trump may just win outright, without any hanky-panky, because the Biden administration has just become so hapless. So I think that I think you would say, right, that you're probably going to see more and more confrontations, like confrontational politics, like you've seen in Washington this week, because, voting, and we always said that we encourage people to vote, but we always said that's a tactic, and it's one of many, and there are a lot of other ones out there.
Yeah, and just an important thing I want to note is talking about Striketober and talking about the people versus fossil fuels is that the people realize that politics as usual in Washington is not effective. It's not working for them. It's people are without jobs. People haven't had a minimum wage raise in decades, and then the planet is burning up and communities are being poisoned. And they realize that organizing a direct action and being part of union-led or community-led efforts is actually the only thing that's going to really make a change here. And I think, if anything, if we are in this sort of like kind of breaking up of the republic or breaking up of things, and we don't have to go there, but like people are recognizing that like it's going to be these sort of like do-it-yourself efforts, which are going to undermine these institutions, which are poisoning us, strangling us, starving us, et cetera. And I think that's an important lesson. I actually feel like that's one of the themes of our show, just in general.
Yeah, Biden and the Democrats, essentially their calendar says November 7th, 2016, right? The day before Trump was elected, because they're acting like we're in this old world. And they're basically, still, going on about unity and bipartisanship, and they're letting two senators. I mean, Mitch McConnell still controls the Senate. So it's scary times. I think the lesson too that we saw last summer, and nobody wants to see a repeat of that. It was scary. We talked every day. We were afraid that Trump was going to really, literally unleash on these people and kill, 10,000. It was going to look like Mexico City in 1968, or something like that. But what that did was get the attention of important people, especially, as we've said many times, the ruling class, right? And they saw that instability and that chaos, and they stepped in. Well, you can't count on that happening all the time, because you also, need some kind of political structure, if you're going to play that game. And the Democratic Party ain't it. Now, was there any, even kind of weak or timid support for the actions this week from anybody, senators or AOC or the Green New Deal people, or was it just like clearly a people-oriented, especially led by Indigenous people, oriented action, or was there anything more to it?
I mean, it was definitely like a people-led effort. I did not see much evidence, if there was any like politicians, progressive politicians supporting it. I didn't see it. I'll say that there are members of the Progressive Caucus in the House, which are pretty supportive of these efforts. I'll say that it just didn't like really kind of pop up on my radar. I will say that there were like a lot of interesting tweets. The Department of Interior would, like, while these people were doing a sit-in in their offices, were starting out tweets about how they're going to be fighting for communities in Glasgow at the conference of the parties, the UN climate talks in a couple of weeks, things like that. It's like they must have like scheduled that without the expectation and never took it down, and then you saw where Department of Interior put tweets out saying how their security personnel were trying to de-escalate people's use of the First Amendment rights. And meanwhile, the security personnel were tasing people outside of the Department of Interior, beating them with batons, right? Of course, the media is about how one officer went to the hospital, didn't talk anything about the number of protesters that were injured by the security and their non-lethal weapons.
And I mean, we can't say this enough. We've been saying it, 100 times. The GOP will defend anybody. They're defending the people, who attacked the Capitol on January 6th. Trump is, once Ashley Babbitt or whatever her name was, turned into a national martyr. They will defend people who do the most odious and horrific and violent things. And the Democratic Party and the liberals will run away from anything that hints of direct action, nonviolent direct action. I mean, that's the important part of this too. And so, I still have no problem with, saying that the election was a good outcome, getting rid of Donald Trump, deposing that regime was important. But, we've gone from, 212 degree water to 211 degree water, basically. And we got a long way to go. So I hope these actions, do you sense that this kind of stuff has a momentum now and you're just going to keep seeing it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm actually fairly buoyed by I think the work that communities and direct action movements do, I'm fairly buoyed by that, because I feel like so many people are involved in that. And I'm buoyed by this, this wave of strikes that we're seeing beginning to unleash right now. If we look at what's happening with the climate, how we're moving quickly towards 1.5 degree Celsius increase, and how the UN climate talks are probably going to, what are they going to result in? There's still going to be like some big powerful country which is going to be like hugely problematic in that mix, maybe the one we live in, and so when I look at how Mother Earth is responding, like Penny and Shannon told us a couple of weeks ago, it's like that's Mother Earth responding to what humans have been doing to it. I find that pretty scary. But how we're responding to try and get the people who are destroying the planet to respond, I'm fairly buoyed by that. So
are you seeing more kind of, I guess, mainstream NGO type groups who may have shied away from kind of direct actions or more aggressive action starting to kind of come around on that too?
I'll say that one of the most conservative groups on direct action, which was the Sierra Club, a whole bunch of their staff actually got arrested like on Tuesday, including their like interim director.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a nice step. That was a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, the situation is grave and the time is short. So
the mass arrest scenario at the White House is like, just to be real, it's fairly performative. It's like you go sit down. The park police do, take a couple of steps to give warnings, and they walk people away, and you get a citation. At one point, they were just letting people go. But I do think it's an important thing that, that there are people who have these like liberal politics who would never do anything like that, basically kind of took a step. That it's a gate. In some ways, I've called it like a gateway to people taking more bold action. So
yeah. Well, I mean, when the extermination of people is at stake, it's kind of a big deal. And people have kids and grandkids who they want to, hopefully see have a good future. So we'll see.
I'll also say the important thing here, and the theme of the week also, is that this is an indigenous-led movement. It's a frontline-led movement where we had people from African American communities on the Gulf talking about the poisoning in their communities and the organizing they do, and same with like the indigenous leadership.
Yeah. Anything else about Washington?
People need to go do more of it everywhere they live.
I want to say I didn't. Scott and I usually talk before we're going to say, and I forgot to tell. I do want to say a couple things because earlier this week we celebrated Columbus Day, and I want to remind you that last year we did an awesome show. We interviewed Michael Oberg, who is a professor at SUNY Geneseo, about the origins of Columbus Day. And so we would encourage you to go look for that on Green and Red Podcast, and we'll put a link to that in here too. And also, I mean, if you've heard me speak for more than an hour, you know that my grandparents all came from Sicily, and I grew up in a community that was overwhelmingly Italian American. And so every year, this is Italian American Heritage Month, in fact, but there's this centerpieces on Columbus, which is really unfortunate And I always try to remind people that Columbus Day was an effort to mollify Italian Americans. It was first kind of announced by President Harrison, right, in 1892, because a year before that, 13 Sicilians had been lynched in New Orleans by the white power structure there. Southern Europeans, especially Southern Italians and Sicilians, were considered genetically inferior. And so they wanted to have a day kind of to placate them and say, we respect you, we know that you're good Americans. And they chose Columbus, right, as the, who sailed for Spain. And he's from Genoa, which is in the north, whereas the vast majority of Italian immigrants in the United States are from the south or from Sicily. And there's huge tension between North and South Italy. And so it was an attempt to placate them. And so, once again, I just want to remind, if you're out there, if you're Italian American, Columbus, we could do way better. We have Sacco and Vanzetti, and we have Joe DiMaggio and Yogi Berra and Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett. So, but go back and check out the interview with Mike Oberg that we did last year. It was really worth seeing, right?
We've been posting as an encore episode on a lot of our social media. If you want to check us out on Facebook and Twitter with that.
And I think, so now we're good. We can go to our last segment, which we just started a few weeks ago, our Love Them, They're Liberals. Love me, love me, love me, I'm a liberal. We need to get Phil Oakes. We need to flash that in. But every week we just pick somebody and make fun of him or her because it's what we do. And this week is really an easy mark, but, and she could be our choice pretty much every week, but it is Nancy Pelosi. Speaking of Columbus Day, there's another Italian American who I would not celebrate either. But the current budget bill includes a provision that would give the IRS power, the authority to investigate any deposit over $600, right? Now, if you've seen TV, you know that there's always this. Remember when Carmela stole Tony's money and she deposited $9,990 in several different accounts because 10,000 was the benchmark, right? Now, I don't know how the current bill works, but I mean, everybody in America pretty much is on direct deposit. And so most people are paid more than $600. So does that mean the IRS can now look at every single deposit that you ever get? But the point is, people complain about this, and Pelosi is adamant that will stay in the reconciliation bill. And I guess the point isn't really, whether the IRS investigates it so much as the fact that, I mean, what better way to piss people off, working people, the people you claim you represent, than to give the IRS more power, right? Years ago, I remember I heard these liberals kind of defending the IRS, and I was like, what is wrong with you? Like, no, every lefty in the country should be out attacking the IRS, right? Because who does that? The right wing does that, right? So anyway, Nancy Pelosi is my pick for liberal of the week. I don't know. I mean, I think you're okay with that one, aren't you?
I'm always okay with that one.
Yeah,
I think we have our sort of rotation that we
we need to. So. I mean, I really wanted to avoid that, but I just, why would you identify yourself with the IRS and say, by the way, if you deposit more than $600, which is like first communion money, baptism money, if you're in an Italian community, that's what you bring to kids. So like $600 deposit's nothing, and they're probably not going to look into it, but. It's just the optics, right? The optics of it. It couldn't be worse. It's a way to say, we're going to let these corporations off. We don't care about their trillions of dollars in their offshore accounts and all that other stuff. But if you deposit $600, we're going to keep an eye on you. So this is kind of what we're up against. These are the allies, by the way. These are the so-called good guys, right?
These are the ones who, do their performative tearing of Trump's State of the Union speech.
Yeah. Yep. Wear kente cloth and all that kind of stuff. So, and one other, I guess, kind of honorable mention, and I don't know if this would go to RBG or to Katie Couric, but I don't know if you saw that story because I know you've been busy. But and this wasn't really that surprising. When Colin Kaepernick took a knee, Ruth Bader Ginsburg attacked him. Even though like she's a Supreme Court justice and like there's a First Amendment, and she went off, and Katie Couric, I guess, did an interview with her, but left that out because she didn't want to embarrass her. So this is where we are, where one of the great liberal icons, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is the reason Amy Coney Barrett is on the Supreme Court, who's probably the reason Roe v. Wade is going to be, if not overturned, drastically cut back, liberal hero, and they're covering up for her. So there's kind of, I guess Katie Couric would get the honorable mention on that one. So anyway, any last thoughts?
No, I think we've kind of hit it the week.
Yep.
Hit it for the week.
Well, remember, get your postcards, check the notes for everything, and also remember, even though we're angry and pissed off, that the true revolutionary is guided by great feelings of love. And
yep.
So we will see you again next week.
Yeah, and if you want to become a donor to this podcast, please check us out at greenredpodcast.org and hit the support button, or go to patreon.com/greenredpodcast and become a patron. We're shooting for 25 patrons. We're at 21 now. So help us out. Help a couple brothers out. Talk to you soon.